Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as I do each and every week. This is episode 136. I hope everybody's having a great week out there. We're having a fantastic week here in beautiful central Kentucky. First week of fall, always my favorite time of year. College football going on. I love that stuff. Lots of festivals happening. As always, your homework assignment is to go check out a live band if it's safe for you to do so. We have a fantastic episode for you today. I am going to be joined by the great Jared Schonig right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com, follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned before the break there, we're going to be joined by Jared Schonig today. Jared has a fantastic new double record coming out on Friday, September 24th. The records are called Two Takes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 is a great quintet record, and Volume 2 is a big band record. Same songs, different formats, and it is a very unique listen. I've been jamming on it for a couple of weeks now. I interviewed Jared a couple of weeks ago, and we wanted to get this episode out right as the albums are hitting the street. Jared's playing is just phenomenal. You may also know him from some of his work on Broadway. He was part of The Color Purple on Broadway. He has been doing Moulin Rouge for a couple of years. This is a guy that's playing at such a high level, and this is such an ambitious release. We just had to get him on the show, so I know you're going to get a lot out of this. So please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle podcast, Jared Schonig. Hey, Jared, good evening. How are you, man?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
Man, I can't complain too much. Thanks for taking time to come on the Drum Shuffle podcast. We appreciate it. Now, I know you're up in New York. Did you survive all the crazy storms and stuff this week?
Yes. It was pretty crazy. My wife and I had just put our son to bed last night, and all of a sudden our phones went off with the emergency alert saying there was a tornado warning, not even a tornado watch. So that was pretty frightening. Rain was coming down pretty hard, and we turn on the news, and they definitely said watch out for a tornado in the next 30 minutes. But luckily, everything was cool. Just lots of floods in the neighborhood, and our apartment was fine. But yeah, lots of trees down, lots of floods, and an unhappy dog with all the water outside.
Yeah, yeah, man. I live that life too when it rains here in central Kentucky. My dogs,
Yeah.
both of them, they have feet made of cotton candy. Apparently, I don't know. So
they don't like it. Yeah, it's funny.
They do not like it at all. So, well, cool, man. Well, again, thanks for taking time to do it. Traditionally, yeah, man, for sure. Traditionally here on the Drum Shuffle, we kind of go through, your background information, and, you've had a really interesting career up to this point, but we go all the way back. So tell everybody, where you grew up and how you got into drumming to begin with, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm from Los Angeles, California. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. There was a big earthquake in Northridge, where I'm from, in '94. But before that, I was born in the early to mid '80s to two professional musicians. My dad is a studio and orchestral drummer percussionist who's done a ton of work over the years on films and TV and LA Phil and all that stuff. And my mom is a professional piano teacher and a classical pianist. So I grew up with music in the house all the time. I can remember really early on listening to a lot of R&B records with my dad and him playing me Herbie Hancock, and he was a pretty big jazz fan, but more just playing lots of different types of music around the house. And classical music was also always going. So I kind of had that background a little bit as well. I actually started on classical piano, taking lessons from about age 5 to, I guess, around 14, 15, so a good 10 years of classical piano. Hadn't really touched the drums, would kind of go out and mess around on my dad's drums in his studio once in a while, but I didn't really see that as an option for myself. My parents really wanted me to stick to the piano. I was pretty good at it and, doing competitions and winning awards and stuff. So I got to middle school and I had a brief stint on the oboe. Small facts about me, and played oboe in middle school orchestra. You don't hear too many drummers who also play oboe, so there you go. Funny story. The only reason I picked that instrument is because they said I couldn't play piano in orchestra band, and I said, well, what's really hard? They said the French horn and the oboe, so I chose the oboe.
Nice.
And so I got to high school, and I was starting to kind of gravitate towards the drums. I played a little bit. I was starting to practice by myself at home. My dad wanted me to get a teacher. My first high school I went to was a big marching band and drumline high school called Granada Hills, and they had a great reputation, and I marched in the marching band and also did drumline and was really, really into it. Played in the jazz band also, but I was kind of like the second drummer. There was an older guy in there who played. He was pretty good, but, I learned a little bit from him. And basically my story is told and was forever changed after my freshman year of high school when my parents – they decided that I needed a better musical education and that I was really, getting into the drums and getting into music. And they wanted me to go to this arts high school, which was pretty far from my house. It was a good 25 miles. And in LA, that's a lot. It took me an hour and a half each way on the bus to get to this high school called Hamilton Music Academy or Academy of Music. And they kind of tricked me into going one day, I guess. This was second semester of my freshman year. My dad woke me up in the morning. He drove me, he said, let's go for a ride. Let's go just drive around on a Saturday. And, drove about half an hour, no traffic on Saturday. We get to the school. My dad says, oh, this is a good school for music. I heard about it. My friend's kid goes here. Let's go check it out. I was very confused. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? This is Saturday morning. Like, I want to be sleeping in. And he brought me to the music building, and lo and behold, they were having auditions, music auditions, drum auditions for their jazz band next year. And my dad had set it up for me and tricked me into going. I ended up playing for them, and they really liked me, and they offered me a spot in one of their bands for the next year. And I guess that was kind of it. My parents, they basically forced me to change high schools. And anybody can remember, most people can remember what high school was like, and you're meeting lots of people, and you got your friends. You don't want to leave and go somewhere else. So I was pretty distraught at the beginning, but little by little, I started to see how incredible it was, and all these incredible musicians and actors and dancers, and just a big arts hub of these incredible, talented young people that I was around. And there was also a lot of people who had graduated from there, who were doing things in the music business. And it basically 6 months later, after being at Hamilton, I knew I wanted to be a professional musician and play the drums, and most importantly, play jazz. There was an incredible musician who's now become very, very famous, named Kamasi Washington, who I played a lot with when he was a senior and I was a sophomore, and a bunch of great actors and other musicians there. So I was pretty set in knowing that this is what I wanted to do. I recently was talking about this with someone else about like the first concert that also really kind of gave me bit me with the jazz bug, which was seeing the great bassist Ray Brown and his trio in, I want to say 1999, around the corner from my house at Cal State Northridge, with the wonderful drummer Kareem Riggins, and one of my favorite pianists, Jeff Keezer. So this was like right around the time where I switched high schools, where I was starting to play lots of drums, taking lessons, and getting really into jazz, and like seeing this, trio concert with arguably, one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time, was pretty inspiring. And yeah, I just loved it and knew that that's what I wanted to do. Another small story that I always remember kind of as a pivotal point in my life, even though it didn't really make me want to play the drums, but my dad took me when I was in middle school, probably sixth grade, down to the Union, local 47 in LA, to an Elvin Jones clinic / concert.
Nice.
And it was definitely an incredible, awe-inspiring concert. But I remember that Elvin had been delayed in his flight, or something had really hung him up, and his band was there, but he wasn't there. And I think it was over an hour and a half that people still waited for him to show up, and no one left and no one got rowdy. And, I think, at the time I was probably like, Dad, can we just go? Let's get out of here. But my dad, made me stay and said, you're going to love this. And I totally was super, awestruck, even though at that point in time, I wasn't really playing the drums. But just to see this guy and his power and his presence on an instrument that would eventually be mine was probably a pretty formidable part of my existence, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, there's a lot there that I could unwrap, but I just want to, not to put too fine a point on it, having parents who are supportive of the arts, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, when I was a kid and said, hey, I'm going to be a professional drummer when I grow up, everybody was like, well, what's plan B? What because you're undoubtedly going to fail. So what is your, what is your fallback plan? Our daughter is at an art school, which is, 400 miles away. And, as a high school student, she's a pre-professional ballet dancer, but no way. Yeah. So, my wife and I, we were like, we're going to give you every opportunity. If that's what you want to do, we're going to be supportive. And that makes all the difference in the world, whether your art is acting, music, dance, not once have we said, well, what's your fallback plan? Does it matter? Yeah. If that's what you want to do, then go do it. Right.
Yes, exactly. And, to add to that, I mean, my parents were always, in my mind, they were always supportive of me choosing to do this. It's funny, when I talked to them later in life, they were a little worried, just because they knew how hard it was to do it. And, I witnessed my dad, as a very in-demand percussionist lose work and become not as in demand as he got older, and as the film industry moved, elsewhere, not so much in LA anymore, because things started getting farmed out to Seattle and, European orchestras. So I think, my parents were a little worried. But in my mind, I always saw them as super supportive, and they never, ever asked what my backup plan was. And they would often, ask me, like, do you really want to move to New York after college, or do you want to move back to LA and try to do stuff here? And then they would ask, do you really not want to get a master's degree and not have that to teach? And I said, no, I'm not going to. I don't want to do that. I don't need that. And luckily it worked out for me. But also, your parents want to provide the best options for their children. Good parents do, and they were trying to do that for me, even though I was, very, very set in my ways of what I wanted, and I didn't know where my career would end up at all. But I'm obviously been doing it for a while now, and nobody would know exactly what I'd be doing. But so I think that having parents that support the arts, or even if they have no idea about anything artistic, like if you just have, normal parents but are really supportive, that's an incredible thing. And just, arts in schools is really, really important.
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, it's one of the most important things, in my opinion. And, whether, not even arts, but any parents, parents, whatever the living situation is, anybody that'll put up with a beginning drummer for hours on end, I mean, that takes a special person. And, I've talked that to death on here, but, I mean, I used to get off the bus and run, to the basement to start hammering away at Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and all that crap for just hours on end, and, driving everybody up the wall. So, I think it just, it sets you on the right trajectory if you are going to chase it as a career, because it's not an easy career, but having that support system saying, hey, go do it, go do your thing, is very important. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you ended up doing college at Eastman. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So you made the move cross country for college. Eastman is it in Rochester, New York? Is that right?
Yep. Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, we had the great Bernie Dressel on the show, a couple years back.
Awesome.
I think he was an Eastman guy as well.
He is an Eastman guy, and a good friend of my dad's. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, man. Bernie's he's the cat's pajamas in my opinion. He's a great guy.
Totally.
Very, very pleased to have him as a buddy. But so That had to be a little bit of culture shock for an LA kid moving to Rochester, New York, I'm assuming. So,
Yes.
did you look around? I mean, was, North Texas and Miami and Berkeley, were all of those on the short list?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I guess my kind of top schools of where I was thinking about going were Cal Arts, which was, close by to me. I would have studied with the great Joe LaBarbera was teaching there, and UCLA was another option for me where Billy Higgins was teaching. I got full rides to Berkeley in Boston and North Texas, and also I had auditioned for Manhattan School and gotten in, and it's so funny why I chose Eastman. A couple of reasons. Yeah, I mean, like I could have gone to a lot of different places and had less debt, but I chose to go to Eastman because I really loved basically I saw the big bands at an IAJE conference when I was still in high school, and I really, really loved their music. They played also with the New York Voices that year, which is, a group I ended up touring with and playing with a lot. But also the great Fred Sturm was the director there, and I really loved his music. We played some of it in high school. But basically the main reason why I chose Eastman was after going to the in-person audition there, felt like it was the right fit for me. It was going to be a small program, very competitive program where you, just their audition process was like a 2-day thing where you did your audition with the jazz trio for all the jazz faculty. You did a legit audition for John Beck, who's obviously a legend of percussion and of pedagogy. And then they put all the jazz majors together, or the jazz audition majors together, to play together and kind of play free and improvise together, and kind of just to get them to see what could happen. And I thought that was really, really interesting. I felt like it was a very kind of hands-on audition process. Its reputation had obviously preceded itself. Both my parents had wanted to go there, but didn't get in. It was very far away from LA, which was maybe the main reason I wanted to go there, just to get out of LA and get away from, my life, my parents mostly. But another reason was a friend of my dad and great trumpet player and musician, Clay Jenkins, had just taken the job a year before I auditioned, and really, really wanted me there. And that was a great feeling to kind of know somebody already on the faculty. And looking back, it was an incredible experience for me there for a number of reasons. Most important, I think, are two things. The students who were older than me when I was there were incredible. I mean, just the amount of material and the amount of things I learned from the older drummers, the older bass players, everyone there. There was such a beautiful group of human beings and musicians. And also my teacher, who was really, really incredible, and that's Rich Thompson, who, I came to college basically not ever listening to any jazz post 1965. I was more of a modern player, and I liked to listen to modern recordings, and the only stuff I liked that was older was Buddy Rich, and I had never dove into the lineage of jazz drums like I did, with Rich. And I had a wonderful teacher in high school named Jerry Califf, who's a great, great drummer, and I learned so much from him. But mostly I learned how to be a good musician and less drumistic things. But with Rich, it was just an incredible, history of jazz drums, and that's what I needed. I got my butt kicked there. I started at the bottom and I ended up at the top, and I think that in a school with 40, 50 drummers, you never know how you're going to end up, but the program was so small there. I think we had about 50 or 60 jazz majors total in a school of, 700 or 800 undergrads. So obviously a very big classical school, but smaller jazz department. And maybe 10 drummers total. And they only took 2 drummers a year, 3 drummers a year.
Yeah.
It's very selective. And, I thought I could have gone to North Texas and, where there's 40 drummers, 50 drummers, you're all trying to get in one of the 9 big bands, and it's a different vibe. And I think that for me at the time, just going to Eastman was really great. Just a great place to learn and to really focus and to really shed and to really be immersed in music and jazz and new music and free jazz and Balkan rhythms and, anything you can think of. Somebody was into it and somebody really wanted to play it, which was great.
Yeah, for sure. Well, being a jazz head, at that time, all through the 90s and early 2000s, New York was basically the epicenter of the jazz world.
Right.
So I'm sure there was some draw, Rochester isn't exactly a bus ride away from New York City. It's
Right.
it's kind of a drive, but it's a hell of a lot closer
Correct.
than LA, right?
Correct.
So
yeah. We used to come down to New York at least a couple times a year to see shows. I saw so many of my favorite drummers play in New York. Brian Blade, Jeff Ballard, Jim Black, Kenny Washington. I saw Roy Haynes in New York for the first time. Yeah, we would come down and we would make a hang out of it, and we would stay at somebody we knew's place and drive back the next day and get back for class. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience being so close to New York. Yeah, and my other thought about that is when I came to New York City to audition for Manhattan School, I knew that I wanted to live here. I just knew it. I knew this is the place that I wanted to end up, and knew that I didn't want to go back to LA. But, and then I went to Rochester, which is nothing like New York City, but the snow there is horrendous. Yes, and to talk about culture shock, for sure. I'd never seen snow in my life until I got to Rochester, and then one of the years I was there, I don't know, it snowed for 60 days straight or something. Broke the record.
Yeah,
not right.
I've never seen snow before. Now it's all I see. So
now it's all I see. Yeah, basically that's what happened.
From one extreme to the other. Well, that's just amazing. And I certainly don't want to gloss anything over, but once you got to New York City, it's hard to break into that scene. Obviously there's a million guys that have a ton of jazz chops, right? That are looking for gigs in New York City. It's kind of where you go if if you want to do the jazz thing. At least it was at that time. It may be different now. Right. I don't know, but when you relocated and moved to the city, I don't know how long it was before you started getting all those really big gigs, but, and then, we want to certainly touch on the Broadway connection as well. But, sure. What were some of the first things you started doing once you got to the city?
Great question. So I was very fortunate to basically play with a bunch of great musicians in college that all graduated before me and moved to New York and were kind of waiting for me to get here. So, grad students, seniors, when I was a junior, et cetera, I had this clique and this group of people that basically kind of planted the seed early in New York. And And when I got here, I did a couple things. Number one, I needed a day job because I needed health insurance. I'm type 1 diabetic. I've been diabetic since I was 10 years old. And, that's a real thing. Like, if I don't have health insurance, then the amount of money I'm paying for insulin just to stay alive is, it's tremendous. So, yeah, I worked at Apple. And at that time, you had to work full time to get the benefits. So I did. And I played gigs in the nighttime, and I was playing gigs with my buddies that I knew there already. I had started to play some gigs with guys I had known in high school through all-state bands or Stanford Jazz Camp, which was a big kind of part of my upbringing, I guess. And, I was so basically playing with people I knew, nobody super famous, but we were all kind of getting our young jazz thing together. And basically early on, one of my best friends, Dan Loomis, great bass player who went to Eastman, he had moved there. And when I got there, we basically started a band pretty early, a trio called the Wee Trio, with a great vibes player named James Westfall. And that was one of my first gigs, and we really took that group from, just a band in Brooklyn to, a national touring act that did a lot of great, great stuff. And through Dan, I met a lot of people, a lot of musicians. It's funny, for a long time, I could trace every gig I've had to someone I went to school with. And now and I think most people can do that, or want to try and figure out, how did I get this gig? I wonder who recommended me, blah, 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 blah. Cause when I got to New York, I didn't do the jam session thing, which is definitely a big part of the New York jazz scene. You go to Smalls, you play the sessions. You go to Cleo's, you play the sessions. People hear you there. People hire you for gigs. My first 2 years in New York, when I was working at Apple, and I ended up getting a teaching gig at a private school, and I was playing gigs in the nighttime, I was pretty exhausted. And it's funny, I can't remember much of that time. I was so exhausted all the time, but I was playing a lot of great music, but just working my butt off, and just meeting lots of people and playing sessions at people's apartments and meeting lots of great new musicians. And I think basically it wasn't really until I quit Apple and, became just a gigging musician, was when I started to get some nice gigs and some higher profile touring things. And is also when I started to sub on Broadway. So everything kind of happened at once, and I kind of attribute that to just making the change in my life that I needed at that time, which was to just focus on music, and I'll figure out the health insurance another way. And that's what happened with that.
I see. Well, it goes without saying, and for those listeners that aren't familiar, you did The Color Purple for, a period of time, was all over TV with appearances there, Jennifer Hudson, yeah. All that stuff.
Right.
And I guess you guys are about to go back. I don't know, but you've been doing Moulin Rouge for a while. So,
yeah.
And the whole Broadway shutdown thing, I won't really get into that, but you used your time very wisely. And again, I'm not trying to gloss anything over, but I want to get to this, brilliant new double record that it just hit the street, or about to hit the street. Right. So talk to me a little bit about, the Broadway thing and all the TV appearances. And I'm assuming that shutdown time is when you really started formulating this plan of, okay, I'm going to step out as a band leader. Obviously you've got the composition skills from your time behind a piano. etc. But
Right.
this is a very ambitious release for a first-time band leader. I mean, most drummers don't just like, okay, I'm going to do a quintet and a big band record at once.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Kudos to you for doing it.
Thank you. I'll tell you a little bit about the lineage of this project. So this actually was a pre-pandemic idea, a pre-pandemic recording. So everything happened in late 2019. And my plan was to put it out in the spring of 2020. And obviously, we know what happened. That wasn't feasible. I still had a lot of stuff to do with it, mix, master, art, all the stuff. Basically, we had done the recording sessions in New York, in late 2019. And, I'll tell you a little bit about just that process. I have a book of material, as like a co-leader of the Wee Trio, which featured all of our original compositions. So I've been writing for a long time, and I'm not one of those guys that sits down and can write a tune a day. I need deadlines. I need projects to write for, and I'll make it happen, and I'll be proud of what I do. But I'm not somebody who has an exorbitant amount of material. So over the years, I write things that I really want to play for the rest of my life, which is great. But I only could pick a handful of those that I wanted to put on a record. And I've always loved quintets. I love writing for two horns. I love alto and trumpet the combination. And so I had this music, and I had always wanted to do a big band record. A big band has been a large part of my musical life and my career in New York. I've basically played with every major big band that's toured or, done lots of work in New York, except for the Vanguard band. But I played with every other one, Darcy James Argue, Alan Ferber, a bunch of Grammy, nominated people, Jim McNeely, Mike Oliver. Anyway, so I love doing it. It's been a big part of my life. And I knew that I wanted my music to be on there. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I'll do some big band arrangements. And at a certain point, I realized, man, I'm just not that good at this. There are way better people at this, geniuses, who could do something really incredible with my music. And I basically, I put together this short list of my favorite arrangers, favorite composers working in the big band world. And, all of them were down. All of them said yes. All of them were really excited. All of them were really pumped about the project. And I was so fortunate to basically get everybody I wanted. So my idea was always to put these two records out together in tandem to just show how things can get transformed, how music can sound different when it's given new life, given a new pen, and a new take. And basically the records are called Two Takes, Volume 1, Volume 2. One is the quintet, one is the big band. And there are a lot of really incredible musicians on both of them. My favorite players, my favorite musicians. The quintet has, my favorite. Basically, in my life, I've got to play with my two favorite trumpet players ever. Nicholas Payton, who obviously I listened to a ton as a young jazz musician, and got to play with him in New Orleans through the connection of James Westfall. And then, he did the last Wee Trio record. He's on 3 tracks and plays on, one of my tunes, and was pretty amazing. And the other trumpet player is Marquise Hill, and I did a tour with Marquise maybe 5, 6 years ago with a pianist I work with a lot named Lawrence Hopgood, who I also work with, the vocalist Kurt Elling. And I was floored by this guy, Marquise. He's like this giant and this such a beautiful person and human being. And, I loved every note he played. He sounded so great. And I knew that this is the guy that I wanted on my record, my quintet record. And I basically centered the whole sessions around when he could do it. Him and Godwin Louis are the horns. Godwin is an incredible alto sax player who has played with everybody and is just also a wonderful human being. And the pianist is Luis Perdomo, who I've also been listening to since I was a young jazz musician on a bunch of Miguel Zenon and David Sanchez records. He's incredible. And then the bass player is Matt Closey, who's been one of my oldest friends and favorite musicians in New York. I started playing with him 2006, 2007, pretty, shortly after I moved here. So that's the quintet. And then the big band basically is comprised of some of my favorite people in New York who are also on a ton of records that I listened to as a kid. Most of these guys played in Buddy Rich's big band, Woody Herman's band, have done tons of Broadway shows, are on a ton of commercial recording, and they're just all incredible people. Also have like the great Johnny McCaslin on a bunch of tracks who is also an incredible human being and wonderful musician, and whose band I've played in. And another one of my faves is Nir Felder, who's a great guitar player who's, he's just blowing up. He's playing with everybody, and rightfully so. He's just an amazing musician. So I realize I didn't talk about the Broadway thing, but if you'd like, I will.
No, man, I just, I want to say, I've been listening to the record, off and on here for the last week or so, since I got my, preview copy, or whatever. Cool. And, sonically it's beautiful. The compositions are great. One of the things that I want to point out to folks, and I never air these like right after I record them, so I want to make sure I get the release date out. It's available on September 24th on Anzac Records, and I'm assuming it's going to be available anywhere you can pick up your fine music. But correct. On the quintet record, one of the coolest things that I think I've ever heard as an opening track is Intro to Whiteout. And
nice.
So when it first came on, I was like, oh, wow, man, those drums sound huge. It's kind of like this little, drum break. And then I realized that they were decaying reverb off of the track as it went longer. Right. And it just sets the tone so beautifully for a drummer-led quintet record. It was a brilliant production choice. Thank you. But it's just such a good record. And then when I listen to the big band record, I'm like, wow, this is completely different, but not different at all. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, totally. It's funny, there's that intro to Whiteout, and there's a few drum interludes on there that I intersperse between some tracks. I had this idea to like have processed drums on there, be kind of like a palate cleanser in the middle of these tunes. And my mixer, who's an amazing cat named Chris Allen, who has done a ton of records and works at one of the greatest studios in New York called Sear Sound. I attribute those sound and kind of sonic choices mostly to him. I had a vision, but he executed it in a very, very cool way. And I love what he did with the processing and the different effects. But yeah, the big band tunes, they're the same and they're different. Like you hear the tune, but you can also really get like transformed to a different space, and sonically they're all over the place. People change the feels of the original tune. They pick crazy instruments, the harmony and the grooves are different. Yeah, it's a really cool thing to just like turn over your tune to somebody else and say, do whatever you want with this. Like I didn't tell anybody what to do with any of the tunes. The only thing I wanted was on one of the tunes on Gibbs Street, I wanted Donnie to solo and my boy Ike Sturm on electric bass to solo. And this great arranger, Brian Kroc, just gave me this, brilliant adaptation of it, which I thought was really cool.
Well, I mean, here's what I would say to anybody who, picks up the record, and the way that I approach, listening to these records, is I want to be critical, but not be critical. I mean, I have to approach it as, I'm not David Fricke or whatever, you know what I mean? I'm not writing 1,500 words for Rolling Stone, and I don't like most of those guys, to be honest with you. They're always like, oh, it lacked body. Well, what does that mean? So, but, but, I just put it on, I don't play jazz. I really suck at trying to play jazz. I really do. But I love jazz music. I love it. Cool. But here's what I would say to anybody picking up the record. The quintet is going to be, the quintet record is going to be what you would expect from a great jazz quintet. And then when you put on the big band record, volume 2, it's like, wow, it's just textured differently. And it's, I mean, I can't put it into words, but it really made me smile. And I was just like, man, this is just so damn clever. It's a brilliant idea. It really is.
Thank you.
So I would encourage everybody to pick up a copy. I mean, it's just fantastic from pillar to post, as we say down here in the South. Just a phenomenal record. So kudos to you, and I hope it does really well. So I know you guys are doing a big release show in New York City, so why don't you tell all of our listeners about that? We've got quite a few folks up in the city that tune in every week, so invite them all out to the show.
Cool. Well, October 17th at Birdland in Midtown Manhattan. We'll be doing, basically, a release for both of the albums, but the big band is going to play, and everybody who is on. I used a lot of different people on the big band record just because I have a lot of people I wanted to include, but not everybody can do one gig, so I have kind of my select group of guys who are going to do the gig, and it's going to be incredible, and that'll be my big release party for the two albums for sure. Birdland, 5 p.m. October 17th on a Sunday. So you'll be out of there 6:30, get home, have some dinner, or eat dinner at the club. It's, one of my favorite clubs, great sound, and it should be pretty fun.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, I mean, I just think it's brilliant. And, again, I want to be respectful of your time, of course, but let's touch on the Broadway thing just a little bit.
For sure. Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't know, I'm curious about this, but, when you started doing The Color Purple, I think you garnered a Grammy for that association.
Yep.
You did a lot of TV appearances. You've played for Oprah for God's sakes, and backing up people like Jennifer Hudson, et cetera, playing on Good Morning America. Did you find that raised your profile a great deal? I mean, explain to our listeners how things like that can lead to other things. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, so I had I had gotten into doing some shows, around 2009. And, the way you start out is you sub on shows for other great drummers, and that's a whole other conversation, and a whole different kind of skill set. But, eventually I started getting my own shows. And I was very fortunate. I'll never forget, when I got the call for my first Broadway show, because that was a big turning point in my life. I was going to, make a really good living playing the drums for, 20 hours a week. And then I could sub out and do whatever I wanted the rest of it, whenever I wanted. So that has led to a lot of great experiences, and for me to be able to have a family and just to have a life of balance in New York City, which is always what I wanted, like a musical balance. Because, I'm most happy when I'm doing a lot of different things, whether that be high-profile jazz gigs, sessions, and Broadway shows, even a little bit of teaching here and there. So Broadway has really let me do that, and it's not something I ever thought I was going to do in New York. It just kind of, I don't want to say fell in my lap, but it really kind of did. So by the time I did The Color Purple, I had already done a few shows of my own. The Color Purple was the third show I had a chair for, and definitely the most excited I was to do a show because A, Jennifer Hudson was in it, a huge star, and B, Cynthia Erivo, who has, become a really big global star, that was kind of her beginning. And, I played a lot with her outside of the show and did a lot of wonderful gigs with her and Jennifer Hudson too. So it definitely started to raise my profile and get me more visible, outside of just doing jazz and just doing other Broadway shows. And it definitely led to other things, more of the same work and more of different supporting, some R&B artists and stuff like that. But yeah, like I have continued to do more Broadway shows, and it's a great part of my life. I've been working on the show Moulin Rouge since probably 2017 or 18. I was brought on very early in the development of the music and the tunes and the grooves and just the concepts of the tunes that they were going to use in the show, because it wasn't a strict adaptation of the movie. And a really brilliant dude named Justin Levine is who I started working with, who's the musical supervisor and kind of the brainchild behind all of the musical choices and arrangements. And, we basically got together in a room with a few other musicians and came up with a lot of stuff together. And ever since then, I've been doing workshops for the show, and we had to do it out of town in Boston. Then I came back and I did another Broadway show, and then I left that one to do Moulin Rouge, which opens in July of 2019. And it was great. It's really, really fun to play. I wrote every single thing I play on it. It sounds like me playing the drums on a Broadway show, which is kind of crazy. People hear it and go, how did you get that on there? And because that's what I was hired to do. I was hired to be myself, which was an incredible thing, so, it's just funny to hear other guys sub and play exactly your licks and stuff.
Yeah, it is.
It's like, cause that's what that's the gig. That's the gig. You got to come in, and when your subs learn your show, they transcribe everything you're doing. And when you see it written out, sometimes it's like, oh wow, that's what I do there. That's cool. But yeah, so, we shut down, and we had no idea if we were going to open up again. And when we finally got the official date and time, I think maybe in April of this year, March or April, I was very excited, very ecstatic, because I missed playing that show, and I missed being with that band, an incredible band. And it's a large part of my life. I mean, I didn't play. My family and I, we moved to California for 9 months during the pandemic, and we were hanging out with our in-laws and with my little baby. And I brought my V drums out there. And so I didn't play acoustic drums for 9 months, basically.
Oh, wow.
I did one session in L.A., drove down to L.A. from Monterey, and that was the first time I played acoustic drums. And then, I moved back in June, and I've been happy to have been working a lot since then. But yeah, it was a hard time.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, amazing stuff going on in your life. And, again, want to be respectful of your time. But now that you're, about to get, the record out into the wild, at the end of September, what is next? I mean, might we read someday that you've joined Slayer? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's in the cards for Jared?
Well, basically, me putting these albums out, I've wanted to just, I want to be out there as a leader and not as a sideman. I want to do my stuff. I want my band to play my music. I've already set up a bunch of residencies at colleges where I go in and work with students, and then we play my big band music at a concert. And I love doing that kind of stuff. Like working with kids and doing clinics is one of my favorite things to do. We did it a ton with the Wee Trio. We always had a blast. I feel that the guest artists that came to college, to Eastman when I was there, are some of the most important lessons I've learned from musicians. So I just want to be able to give back and do that for this next generation of musicians. And it's like time for me to step into the spotlight, if you will, and, play with my band and play with my music. So that's what I'm doing. I'm booking it. I'm trying to not be out of town too much because I have a little one and then a little one on the way. But that's what you will be reading about for the next however many years, I hope.
Cool, man. Well, that's fantastic. So do me a favor, tell all of our listeners, how they can find you online, social media, anything you want to share about that so people can follow your career.
Sure. I've got a website at jaredschonig.com, JaredSchonig.com. I update that with my gigs and some blog posts and stuff. I'm pretty active on Instagram. I believe my handle is J Schonig. Could be Jared Schonig, but probably J Schonig. I'm on the Twitter once in a while, but Instagram and my website are the best places. Also, Bandcamp is where my albums will be released and available for sale, but also will be available everywhere else you can stream and buy music.
Well, I'm going to say this right now, and I don't know. I hope you're releasing these in physical form someplace, somehow.
I am.
Okay,
I am.
Good. So, folks, buy a physical copy of this because trust me, it pays Jared a few pennies more than if you stream it on Spotify. Yes. So
correct.
You've got mouths. You got mouths to feed. So right. I know how excited I am when I get my quarterly Spotify check for 17 cents each quarter. It just it makes all the difference in the world to me. So, all joking aside, pick up a copy of it. 2 Takes, Volume 1 and 2, on the street, September 27th. Jared, thank you so much for coming on the Drum Shuffle. We'll do it again. Keep us posted on what's going on, and anytime you have something to share, let me know, and we'll get you back on here.
Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and I appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Have a good one. Thanks, man.
See ya. All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode number 136 of the Drum Shuffle podcast. As always, many thanks to Jared for taking time out of his busy schedule to come on the show. Make sure you go pick up those records this week. They're just fantastic. It's such a good release. Everybody should have that in their drumming library of great tunes. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We simply cannot do this show without each and every one of you doing so week in and week out. As always, I'm going to ask you to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use to listen in to the Drum Shuffle podcast. And the biggest thing you can do to help us out is share a link with a friend. We have a lot of great episodes coming up that you're not going to want to miss. Next week, I am going to be joined by the legendary Russ Kunkel. Just do a quick Google search and you'll know this guy's blood runs platinum. We talked to him about the Immediate Family and their new release that's just phenomenal, so you're not going to want to miss that. We answer every single email that we get here at the podcast. The Drum Shuffle Podcast at gmail.com is where you can reach us. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find more information on me over at jamieeads.com. Once again, your homework assignment, go see a live band if it is safe for you to do so before live music all goes away. So until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.